Hello, my name is Esther, and I'm about to tell you the most satisfying revenge story you've ever heard. Picture this. You've worked your ass off for 3 years at a mid-sized consulting firm in downtown Denver, putting in 60-hour weeks, sacrificing weekends, and watching your social life disappear faster than free donuts in a break room. You've earned that promotion to senior account manager. Everyone knows it. Your colleagues whisper about it, and even your boss's assistant practically confirmed it last month. Then boom, the golden boy gets it instead. Not just any golden boy. Your boss's 26-year-old son who started working there 8 months ago, fresh out of his MBA program, with about as much real-world experience as a houseplant has street smarts. Before we embark on this incredible journey together, I have a small, heartfelt favor to ask. Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a thumbs up. It costs you nothing but means the world to me, and let me know in the comments which beautiful corner of the world you're watching from. Your support truly makes all the difference. But here's where it gets interesting, and trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this. Because what I discovered wasn't just run-of-the-mill nepotism. Oh no, that would have been too simple. What I uncovered was something much darker, something that involved forged client signatures, kickback schemes, and a web of corruption that went straight to the top of our supposedly ethical consulting firm. And the beautiful part? I recorded every single incriminating conversation. Now, before you start thinking I'm some kind of corporate spy or whistleblower extraordinaire, let me be clear. I stumbled into this completely by accident. All I wanted was to understand why 3 years of exemplary performance reviews, client testimonials that read like love letters, and a track record that made other departments jealous wasn't enough to land me the position I'd earned. What I found instead was a conspiracy that would make your head spin. And by the time I was done documenting it all, I had enough evidence to bring down not just the nepotistic golden boy, but the entire upper management structure of Peterson and Associates. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let me tell you how I turned the tables on corporate corruption and came out on top, though not quite in the way I originally planned. Let me paint the scene for you. Peterson and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower on 17th Street in Denver's business district, the kind of place where everyone wore expensive suits and pretended their morning Starbucks runs were client development opportunities. I'd been there since graduating from Colorado State, working my way up from junior analyst to account manager, handling everything from small local businesses to major contracts with companies like Coors and several ski resorts in Vail. My boss, Richard Peterson, yes, the Peterson of Peterson and Associates, was your typical old-school executive, silver-haired, golf-obsessed, and the type who still called the office manager sweetheart in 2023. But here's the thing about Richard. For all his outdated mannerisms, he'd built a solid reputation in the consulting world. Clients trusted him, and honestly, so did I. Until his son Marcus showed up. Marcus Peterson was everything you'd expect from a privileged kid who'd coasted through life on daddy's connections. Tall, conventionally handsome in that generic catalog model way, and possessed of the kind of confidence that only comes from never facing real consequences. He'd graduated from Wharton, a fact he managed to work into every conversation, and had this irritating habit of name-dropping companies where he'd allegedly done consulting work during summers. What made it worse was how effortlessly he seemed to charm everyone. Within his first month, he was grabbing drinks with the partners, playing golf with potential clients, and somehow always managing to be in the right meeting at the right time. Meanwhile, I was still grinding through spreadsheets and client reports, doing the actual work that kept our accounts profitable. The promotion announcement came on a Tuesday morning in September. Richard called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. I remember checking my reflection in my phone screen, straightening my blazer, thinking this was it, my moment. "I'm pleased to announce that we're promoting Marcus Peterson to senior account manager," Richard said, his voice carrying that fake enthusiasm executives use when they're trying to sell a decision they know is questionable. "Marcus has shown exceptional initiative and client relationship skills in his short time with us." The room fell silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but I kept my expression neutral. Years of corporate training had taught me never to show emotion in these situations. But I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me, could practically hear their thoughts. How is this possible? Esther's been here 3 times as long. After the meeting, I retreated to my office, a modest space with a view of the parking garage, and closed the door. I needed to process this privately before I said or did something career-ending. That's when Melissa from HR knocked. "Esther, can we talk?" Melissa had always been straight with me. She'd been at Peterson & Associates for 15 years and had seen it all. We'd developed a friendship built on shared eye rolls at corporate nonsense and occasional happy-hour venting sessions. "I can't officially say anything," she whispered, glancing around even though my door was closed. But that decision didn't come from the usual channels. There was no committee review, no performance comparison. Richard just announced it. That conversation planted the first seed of suspicion. In all my time at the company, promotions had followed a strict protocol: performance reviews, committee discussions, presentations to the partners. But Marcus had bypassed all of it. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to the dynamics around the office. I noticed how Marcus's client meetings often seemed to coincide with his father's schedule, how certain files that should have been accessible to all account managers were suddenly restricted, how conversations would stop abruptly when I walked into rooms. Something was rotten in the state of Peterson & Associates, and I was determined to figure out what. The first real break came completely by accident. I was working late on a Thursday, again, trying to finish a proposal for a new client in Boulder. The office was mostly empty except for the cleaning crew and a few other workaholics like myself. I'd gone to the supply closet to grab more printer paper when I heard voices coming from Richard's office. Now, I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping. The supply closet shared a wall with Richard's office, and the ventilation system in our building was about as sophisticated as a tin can telephone. But when I heard Marcus's voice say, "Dad, we need to talk about the Whitmore contract," I froze. The Whitmore Group was our biggest client, a real estate development company that brought in nearly $2 million annually. I'd been the primary account manager on that contract for 2 years, building relationships with their executives, managing their quarterly reviews, even attending their company Christmas parties. It was my baby, and everyone knew it. "I've already told you," Richard's voice carried clearly through the thin walls. "Esther's been handling Whitmore perfectly. There's no reason to—" "There's every reason," Marcus interrupted, and I could hear the smugness even through the wall. "Look, I've got connections at Whitmore that she doesn't. Remember Jake Whitmore from Wharton? We were in the same business ethics class, if you can believe the irony. He's VP of Operations now, and he's been asking questions about why we haven't been more flexible with their billing." I pressed closer to the wall, my heart pounding. What did he mean by flexible? Richard sighed heavily. "Son, we've built this company on integrity. We don't play those games." "Times change, Dad. Whitmore's hinting at taking their business elsewhere if we don't start playing ball. They want some creative accounting on their project costs. Nothing illegal, just creative. And Jake trusts me to handle it discreetly." "Creative accounting." Richard's tone was flat. "You mean fraudulent reporting?" "I mean survival," Marcus shot back. "Do you want to lose a $2 million client because you're too proud to adapt? Jake's already sent me some documents outlining what they need. All we have to do is adjust some numbers, backdate a few invoices, and everyone wins." The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "If we do this, it stays between us, and I mean completely between us. No one else touches those files." "Of course, Dad. This is exactly why you promoted me. I can handle the sensitive clients, the ones who need special arrangements. Esther's great at the straightforward stuff, but she doesn't have the flexibility for this level of business." I stood there in that supply closet, clutching a ream of printer paper like it was a life preserver, trying to process what I'd just heard. My boss, the man I'd respected for 3 years, was agreeing to commit fraud. And his son, the golden boy who'd stolen my promotion, was the mastermind behind it. But it got worse. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Jake mentioned that Whitmore's been approached by some other consulting firms. Apparently, they're all willing to provide these kinds of accommodations. If we want to keep not just Whitmore but compete for other high-value clients, we need to be prepared to offer similar arrangements." "How many other clients are we talking about?" "Potentially? Half our portfolio. The construction companies, the hospitality groups, even some of the ski resorts. Everyone's looking for ways to massage their numbers, especially with the economy being unpredictable." I heard papers shuffling, then Marcus's voice again. "I've already started preliminary conversations with a few prospects. Nothing concrete yet, but they're interested in our enhanced services." By enhanced services, he clearly meant systematic fraud. I carefully backed away from the wall, my mind racing. This wasn't just about nepotism anymore. This was about a fundamental transformation of the company I'd dedicated 3 years of my life to building. And worse, they were using my own clients, relationships I'd cultivated, as the foundation for their illegal scheme. That night, I went home to my apartment in Capitol Hill and barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood something. But no matter how I analyzed it, the conclusion was unavoidable. Peterson and Associates was about to become a criminal enterprise, and I was the only one who knew. The next morning, I walked into the office with a plan. Well, not exactly a plan, more like a desperate need to understand how deep this corruption went. I'd spent half the night researching corporate fraud laws on my laptop, and the other half staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do with this information. The first thing I noticed was Marcus's behavior. He was practically glowing with confidence, strutting around the office like he owned the place, which technically he sort of did. He'd moved into the corner office that should have been mine, complete with the mountain view and the expensive Herman Miller chair. But more importantly, he was carrying himself like someone who'd just secured his father's complete trust. Around 10 a.m., I watched him walk into Richard's office carrying a thick manila folder. They closed the door, which wasn't unusual, but this time I was paying attention to everything. 20 minutes later, Marcus emerged, walked directly to his office, and made a phone call. Even from across the open floor plan, I could see his body language, animated, excited, clearly delivering good news to whoever was on the other end. I needed to get closer to their operation, but I couldn't exactly march into Richard's office and demand to see what they were working on. That's when I remembered something crucial: our document management system. Every file at Peterson and Associates was stored digitally, with access controls based on security clearance and project involvement. As the former primary manager of the Whitmore account, I still had access to those files, unless they'd specifically revoked my permissions, which they hadn't thought to do yet. During my lunch break, I stayed at my desk and logged into the Whitmore folder. What I found made my stomach turn. There were new documents dated from the past week, invoices I'd never seen before, project timelines that didn't match the original scope of work, and cost assessments that were inflated by nearly 30%. But the real smoking gun was a series of email exchanges between Marcus and someone named Jake Whitmore. "Marcus, per our conversation, we need the attached invoices backdated to March and April to align with our quarterly projections. Standard procedure for our other consulting partners. Appreciate the discretion. J.W." Marcus's response was even more damning. "Jake, no problem at all. I've adjusted the dates and inflated the consulting hours as discussed. These numbers will give you the project cost basis you need for your board presentation. My father and I are happy to provide this level of service for valued clients like Whitmore Group. Looking forward to expanding this arrangement to other projects. MP." I screenshot everything, saving the images to a secure folder on my personal cloud storage. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own workplace. I started arriving early and staying late, not to impress anyone, but to observe patterns. I noticed that Marcus and Richard were having closed-door meetings almost daily now. I saw Marcus making frequent phone calls, always with his office door shut. And I watched as new files started appearing in our system. Files that I didn't have access to, labeled with client names I recognized, but project codes I'd never seen before. The breakthrough came when I was in the break room making coffee around 4 p.m. on a Wednesday. Marcus was at the microwave heating up what looked like leftover Thai food, and his phone rang. He answered without checking the caller ID, clearly expecting the call. "Yeah, Jake, I've got the revised numbers you wanted," he said, not noticing me standing 3 feet away, apparently invisible in my corporate camouflage of business casual and general insignificance. "We've pushed the project timeline back 6 months and increased the consulting fees by 40%, just like you requested. My dad signed off on everything this morning." A pause while Jake responded. "Absolutely. We can do the same arrangement with your Phoenix development. And I've been talking to contacts at Mountain Vista Resorts. They're very interested in similar accommodations for their expansion projects." Another pause. "Trust me, we're committed to this partnership long term. My father's finally realized that this is the future of consulting. Flexibility and creative solutions that benefit everyone involved." That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to start recording these conversations. Not because I'm some kind of natural-born spy, but because I realized that without concrete evidence, I was just another disgruntled employee with accusations that could easily be dismissed as sour grapes over a missed promotion. Colorado is a one-party consent state, which meant I could legally record conversations I was part of. The trick would be inserting myself into conversations between Marcus and Richard, or finding ways to document their phone calls with clients. I spent my weekend researching recording apps and investing in a small, discreet digital recorder that I could keep in my blazer pocket. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Monday morning, I was in the copy room when Marcus walked in, talking loudly on his phone. He had this habit of treating the entire office like his personal space, apparently assuming everyone else was too insignificant to matter. "No, Jake. The beauty of this arrangement is that it's completely legal," he was saying, standing less than 5 feet from me while I pretended to be deeply focused on organizing client files. "We're not falsifying anything. We're just providing consulting services with flexible billing structures that align with your business needs." I discreetly pressed record on my phone, holding it naturally while appearing to scroll through emails. "The key is documentation," Marcus continued. "Everything has to look legitimate on paper. We backdate invoices to match your preferred timelines. We adjust project scope to justify higher fees, and we make sure all our reports support your internal financial projections. Your accountants will never question it because technically we did provide consulting services." Jake must have asked about risk because Marcus laughed, actually laughed, before responding. "Listen, my father's been in this business for 20 years. He knows exactly how to structure these arrangements to stay within legal boundaries. We're not cooking books or creating fake invoices. We're just being creative with our service definitions and billing cycles." The conversation lasted another 10 minutes, during which Marcus essentially laid out their entire fraud scheme. By the time he hung up, I had recorded him discussing 3 separate clients, multiple backdated invoices, and what amounted to a conspiracy to help companies misrepresent their expenses to their boards and investors. But the real jackpot came 2 days later. I was working late again, a pattern I'd established to give myself more opportunities for surveillance, when I heard raised voices from Richard's office. This time, it wasn't just Marcus and his father. There was a third voice I recognized as Tom Bradley, one of the senior partners. "Richard, this is exactly the kind of risk that could destroy us," Tom was saying, his voice tight with stress. "If any of this comes to light—" "It won't," Marcus interrupted. "We're being extremely careful. Every arrangement is structured as legitimate consulting with flexible terms. There's nothing technically illegal about adjusting our billing to accommodate client needs. Accommodating client needs? Tom's voice rose. You mean helping them lie to their investors? I mean providing consulting services that help our clients optimize their financial presentations, Marcus shot back. This is standard practice across the industry. If we don't adapt, we'll lose every major client to firms that are willing to be flexible. Richard's voice was quieter, but I could still hear him clearly. Tom, I understand your concerns, but Marcus is right. We're facing a choice between evolving our business model or watching our company become irrelevant. These arrangements aren't about deception, they're about survival. Survival? Tom was incredulous. Richard, we're talking about systematic fraud. What happens when the SEC starts asking questions? What happens when clients start getting audited and these flexible arrangements come to light? That won't happen, Marcus said, and I could hear the arrogance in his voice. I've been very careful to only approach clients who specifically requested these services. They're not going to report arrangements they initiated. The meeting continued for another hour, with Tom gradually being worn down by Marcus's arguments and Richard's increasing support for the scheme. By the end, they'd agreed to formalize what they called enhanced consulting services for select clients, with Marcus taking the lead on implementation and client relationships. Over the next 3 weeks, I documented everything. My phone became a constant companion, always ready to record. I developed techniques for positioning myself strategically during conversations, for lingering near offices during meetings, for appearing busy while actually gathering intelligence. What I discovered was a corruption that went far deeper than I'd initially imagined. Marcus hadn't just convinced his father to bend rules for existing clients. He'd systematically reached out to prospects across Denver's business community, essentially marketing Peterson and Associates as a firm willing to provide flexible consulting solutions. He'd connected with former classmates, golf buddies, and networking contacts, all but advertising their willingness to help companies manipulate their financial presentations. The most damning recording came during what I thought was going to be a routine client meeting. Marcus had scheduled a lunch with representatives from Summit Construction, a mid-sized company that specialized in commercial real estate projects. I knew about the meeting because I'd seen it on the shared calendar, but I didn't realize the true nature of the discussion until I found myself in the same restaurant. I'd gone to Barolo Grill for a quick lunch between client calls when I spotted Marcus at a corner table with 2 men in expensive suits. One I recognized as David Summit, the company's CEO, from local business journals. The other was younger, probably David's son or a VP. Their table was positioned near the bar, and I managed to get seated close enough to overhear their conversation while appearing to focus on my salad and quarterly reports. I discreetly started recording as soon as I realized what I was hearing. The beauty of our arrangement, Marcus was explaining, is that it provides you with complete flexibility in how you present project costs to your investors and lenders. If you need a project to appear more expensive to justify higher loan amounts, we can structure our consulting fees accordingly. If you need to show lower costs for budget presentations, we can backdate certain services to previous quarters. David Summit leaned forward, clearly interested. And this is all legal? Absolutely, Marcus replied without hesitation. We're not falsifying documents or creating fake invoices. We're simply providing consulting services with flexible billing structures that align with your business needs. Think of it as consulting as a service with customizable financial reporting. The younger man, who turned out to be David's nephew, Jake Summit, asked about documentation. What kind of paper trail does this create? Minimal risk, Marcus assured him. All our invoices will reflect actual consulting services. The flexibility comes in timing, categorization, and fee structure. If anyone ever questions the billing, we have detailed project notes and service records to justify every charge. What happened next made my blood run cold. We're already providing these services to Whitmore Group, Mountain Vista Resorts, and 3 construction companies in Colorado Springs, Marcus continued. Our clients appreciate the discretion and the results. For example, we helped Whitmore reduce their apparent consulting costs by 30% for their Q3 board presentation, then reallocated those expenses to Q4 when they needed to show higher operational costs for a refinancing package. He was openly describing fraud, not creative accounting or flexible billing, systematic manipulation of financial records to deceive investors, lenders, and boards of directors. The meeting lasted 2 hours, during which Marcus essentially provided a masterclass in corporate fraud techniques. By the time they shook hands, Summit Construction had agreed to a trial arrangement, starting with their upcoming downtown development project. That night, I sat in my apartment reviewing my recordings, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd uncovered. This wasn't just nepotism or even simple fraud. It was a systematic corruption of Peterson and Associates that threatened to destroy not just the company, but potentially every client who got involved in these flexible arrangements. I had enough evidence to expose the entire operation. The question was what to do with it. The responsible thing would be to report everything to the authorities, the SEC, the FBI, maybe the Colorado Attorney General's office. But that would mean destroying the company where I'd built my career, potentially sending Richard and Marcus to prison, and probably ending my own future in consulting. The alternative was confronting them directly, trying to negotiate some kind of resolution that would stop the fraud without destroying everything. I chose the direct confrontation, and it was the worst decision I could have made. Tuesday morning, I walked into Richard's office with my phone discreetly recording, and my heart pounding like I'd just sprinted up the Flatirons. Richard was reviewing some documents when I knocked, and he looked surprised to see me. We hadn't had a one-on-one conversation since the promotion announcement. "Esther, come in. What can I do for you?" I'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but sitting across from him in that familiar office, everything I'd planned to say evaporated. Instead, I heard myself blurting out, "I know about the Whitmore arrangement." The change in Richard's expression was immediate and terrifying. The genial, slightly distracted boss I'd known for 3 years vanished, replaced by someone cold and calculating. He set down his pen very deliberately and folded his hands on his desk. "What exactly do you think you know?" "I know about the backdated invoices, the inflated consulting fees, and the arrangements with Summit Construction," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know Marcus has been reaching out to clients offering flexible billing solutions that amount to helping them commit fraud." Richard stood up slowly, walked to his office door, and closed it. When he turned back to face me, his expression was completely neutral, which was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. "Those are very serious accusations, Esther. I hope you have substantial evidence to support claims like that." "I have recordings," I said, immediately regretting the admission. "Conversations between you and Marcus, phone calls with clients, the meeting at Barolo Grill last week. Recordings." He said the word like it tasted bad. Unauthorized recordings of private conversations between father and son, between lawyer and client, between business partners, discussing confidential arrangements. "There's nothing confidential about fraud, Richard." He sat back down and picked up his phone. "Marcus, could you come to my office, please? We need to discuss something important." The 3 minutes it took Marcus to arrive felt like hours. When he walked in and saw me sitting there, his expression shifted from curiosity to suspicion to something that looked like predatory satisfaction. "Dad, what's going on?" "Esther believes she has evidence of some kind of inappropriate business practices," Richard said carefully. "She's made some recordings of private conversations." Marcus actually smiled. "Is that so?" "Esther, I'm surprised at you. Corporate espionage is a serious crime, you know. Recording private conversations without consent, accessing confidential client files, industrial sabotage. These are federal offenses." "Colorado is a one-party consent state," I shot back. "I can legally record any conversation I'm part of." "Were you part of my private conversations with my father?" Marcus asked. "Were you part of my phone calls with clients? Were you invited to business dinners where confidential matters were discussed? The confidence I'd built up over weeks of investigation crumbled. I hadn't thought about the legal implications of my surveillance methods. "Here's what's going to happen," Richard said, his voice taking on an authoritative tone I'd never heard before. "You're going to give me your phone, any recording devices you might have, and any copies of files you've accessed without authorization. In return, we'll consider this a misunderstanding and allow you to resign quietly." "And if I don't?" Marcus leaned forward, and for the first time, I saw the ruthless intelligence that had gotten him through Wharton and into his father's trust. "Then we'll have you arrested for corporate espionage, industrial sabotage, and theft of proprietary information. We'll sue you civilly for damages to our client relationships and business reputation. We'll make sure you never work in consulting again anywhere. Plus," Richard added, "we'll be forced to inform all our clients that their confidential business information may have been compromised by a rogue employee. That could destroy relationships we've spent decades building." They had me completely trapped. I could expose their fraud, but doing so would destroy my career and potentially result in criminal charges against me. The evidence I'd gathered through surveillance and unauthorized file access would likely be inadmissible and could make me the criminal instead of them. I handed over my phone. That should have been the end of the story. Me slinking out of Peterson and Associates with my tail between my legs, probably taking some dead-end job at a smaller firm while Marcus and Richard continued their fraud empire. But sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of justice. 2 weeks after my humiliating confrontation, I was working at a small consulting firm in Boulder, handling basic tax preparation for local businesses. It was mind-numbing work compared to the complex client relationships I'd managed at Peterson and Associates, but it paid the bills and kept me from dwelling too much on my spectacular failure as a whistleblower. That's when I got a call from Jake Whitmore. "Esther, I hope you don't mind me contacting you directly," he said, his voice tense with stress. "I got your new number from someone who used to work with you at Peterson and Associates. We need to talk." We met at a coffee shop in downtown Denver, far from Peterson and Associates and Jake's office. He looked haggard, like someone who hadn't been sleeping well for weeks. "Something's gone wrong with the arrangement Marcus set up," he began without preamble. "Our internal audit discovered discrepancies in the consulting expenses for the Riverside project, the one where Marcus provided those flexible billing solutions you probably heard about." I kept my expression neutral. "I don't know what you're referring to." "Cut the shit, Esther. I know you were investigating what Marcus and his father were doing. That's why you left Peterson and Associates, isn't it?" When I didn't respond, he continued. "Our auditors found backdated invoices, inflated consulting fees, and billing for services that were never actually performed. The discrepancies total nearly $400,000 across 6 months of invoices." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm scared," he said simply. "My company's board is asking questions I can't answer. If they discover that I authorized these arrangements, I'm not just fired. I could face criminal charges for defrauding investors." Jake pulled out his phone and showed me an email chain between himself and Marcus. "Look at this. Marcus assured me everything was legal, but our lawyers are saying these invoices constitute fraudulent billing designed to manipulate our financial statements." The emails were damning. Marcus had explicitly outlined how the inflated consulting fees would help Whitmore Group present higher operational costs to their lenders, while simultaneously allowing them to claim lower expenses on investor reports by spreading the charges across different quarters. "There's more," Jake said. "Marcus has been approaching our other business partners, offering them similar flexible arrangements. He's using our company as a reference, telling prospects that we've been successfully using Peterson and Associates for creative financial solutions." This was exactly what I'd feared when I first discovered their scheme, that it would metastasize beyond Peterson and Associates into a wider network of corporate fraud. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want to know what evidence you have. If this goes to federal investigators, I need to understand how deep the corruption goes and what kind of exposure we're facing. I made a decision that surprised even me. Jake, I don't have any evidence anymore, but I might know someone who could help you document what's really been happening. Over the next hour, I explained to Jake how to legally record conversations, how to document fraudulent billing practices, and how to gather evidence that would hold up in federal court. I told him about one-party consent laws in Colorado, about the importance of getting Marcus to explicitly describe their arrangements, and about the kinds of documentation that would prove systematic fraud rather than simple billing errors. "Why are you helping me?" he asked as we prepared to leave. "Because," I said, "I tried to expose this the wrong way, and Marcus and Richard destroyed me for it. But you have something I never had. You're on the inside of their operation, and you have legitimate business reasons to be asking questions about billing practices." 3 weeks later, Jake called me again. This time, his voice was filled with a mixture of relief and grim satisfaction. "I've got everything," he said. "Recordings, documents, email chains, and testimony from 4 other clients who were approached about similar arrangements. The FBI is very interested in what Peterson and Associates has been doing." The end of this story isn't the clean, satisfying revenge you might expect from a Hollywood movie. Real life is messier than that, with more complex consequences and fewer clear-cut victories. Peterson and Associates was shut down by federal investigators 6 months after Jake Whitmore contacted the FBI. Richard Peterson pled guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud and received 3 years of probation and substantial fines. Marcus, as the primary architect of the scheme, wasn't as lucky. He got 18 months in federal prison and a lifetime ban from working in financial consulting. 11 companies were found to have participated in the fraudulent billing arrangements, resulting in over $3 million in restitution payments and several criminal indictments. Some executives, like Jake Whitmore, cooperated with investigators and received reduced penalties. Others fought the charges and lost everything. As for me, I never did get that promotion, and I never returned to Peterson and Associates. There was no company left to return to. But I did get something more valuable. I learned that sometimes the most effective revenge isn't the one you plan, but the one that emerges from the consequences of other people's choices. I now run my own small consulting firm in Boulder, specializing in ethical business practices and compliance auditing. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and I sleep well at night knowing that I'm helping companies avoid the kinds of problems that destroyed Peterson and Associates. Marcus served his sentence and now works at a small accounting firm in Wyoming, processing tax returns for ranchers and small businesses. According to mutual acquaintances, he's a changed man, humbler, more careful, and apparently committed to staying on the right side of legal and ethical boundaries. The lesson here isn't that good always triumphs over evil, or that corporate fraud always gets exposed. The lesson is that corruption has a way of collapsing under its own weight, especially when the people perpetrating it get overconfident and start making mistakes. Sometimes the best revenge is simply getting out of the way and letting bad people destroy themselves. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate karma, please subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Until then, stay ethical, and remember, in the business world, integrity isn't just the right choice, it's the smart choice.